All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first ever Small Business Resilience Workshop. This new chamber initiative is a component of our Small Business Series, which includes an additional of 2 other trainings and one in-person event that provides resources that empower businesses to thrive and a platform to promote business-friendly legislation. These particular workshops will be offered twice a year and will typically feature local, state, and federal experts who will provide insights and guidance on a variety of topics that aim to enhance the resilience and success of small businesses. Just a few housekeeping instructions. Our guest speakers will be able to answer a short amount of questions at the end of their remarks. So please make sure to submit questions or comments on the platform's live chat. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first guest, Rachel Eichler. I'm sorry if I butchered that. Serves as the Deputy Director of the County's Office of Ethics, Compliance, and Labor Standards. And we're thrilled to have her to start off today's agenda with a sort of HR 101 and inform us about new employment laws that have come into play this year and resources that are offered by the office. So, Rachel, thank you so much for being here today, and please take it away.
Thank you, Jimena. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rachel Eichler. I am the Deputy Director for the County of San Diego Office of Labor Standards Enforcement. It is a pleasure to be here this morning with all of you. And just to get started into the slides, if they are being shown, you can go to the next one. Our mission with the Office of Labor Standards and Enforcement is really just to be the overall resource hub for the county when it comes to advancing labor standards through the community and business engagement, strategic enforcement, innovation and study, and policy development with the commitment to workplace justice. Our values are equity, equality, transparency, accountability, and making a difference. We want to be able to create and foster a culture of compliance in the San Diego County region to make sure that all of the workers and businesses have a fight in their voices heard overall. Next slide, please. So in May of 2021, the board directed the office, the Chief Administrative Office, to create the Office of Labor Standards Enforcement because during the pandemic, a lot of workers were found, unfortunately, being forced to work with the moratoriums in place and had nowhere to turn to. So their only way to find any recourse was go to the Board of Supervisors at the time and ask for some help being forced to work overtime without any pay, being forced to work without PPEs, and being forced to have to work in conditions without receiving any pay or any guidance. So the Board of Supervisors in May of 2021 took the initiative to create the Office of Labor Standards and Enforcement with seven fundamental foundations in mind, as you can see on this slide. They wanted us to be able to be the educational resource for both workers and employers, knowing that we needed to balance the scale on both sides of being able to not only educate our workers on what their rights are, but also businesses on what their rights are. Be the expert when it comes to worker issues, but also business issues, so that businesses could come to us with any questions that they may have when they can't get a hold of anybody within the state or at the federal level. We have to also be the ones to create the community engagement and outreach and report to the board with policy recommendations. Additionally, they wanted us to explore the creation of a workplace justice fund, which is really a resource and assistance, and I'll get into more detail about that initiative for a workplace justice fund where people could have some recourse when they don't have the needs to go to the state and have a wage claim judgment and not be able to get any settlement back when they have a wage theft violation from the state and an employer is not paying them what they're owed. We have the ability to create additional enforcement avenues in coordination with other county departments. So we partner with over 20 other departments in the county to make sure that there's enforcement measures in place. Next slide, please. So what is wage theft? Some examples of wage theft is being paid less than minimum wage, not being allowed to take meal breaks or rest breaks, not receiving agreed upon wages, which could be overtime, commissions, piece rate, and regular wages. The owners or managers taking tips from their workers, not accruing, not allowed to use paid sick leave, failing to be reimbursed for business expenses, not being paid promised vacation or bonuses, and just a number of other things as well. But ultimately, wage theft is the failure to pay full wages to which they are legally entitled. And wage theft can take many forms, which is just what I mentioned: minimum wage, overtime, meal breaks. And then furthermore, an Economic Policy Institute report found California workers who were victims of minimum wage theft were paid less than legal minimum wage and then lost out on $64 in pay a week, or about $3,400 a year. And the most recent data available, which equated to probably $80 stolen each week and $4,250 a year, which based on last year's June inflation rate, that's 9.1%. And this is for workers in the low wage industry. So that means less food on the table, a hard worker, a hard time paying rent or delayed trips to the doctor, not able to put gas in your car. And that's equivalent to 3 months of childcare in California, or nearly 1.5 months rent in San Jose. Next slide, please. So what do we know about wage theft in San Diego County? So a large majority of the time, people in San Diego County don't want to file a claim against their employers because it's fear of retaliation. It's also the lack of information that they don't have available to them, and the resources is most of the time very broad and very vague. They don't understand the process, and there's not a lot of information out there to clearly establish a step-by-step informational setting for them. And also, they don't feel they have the means necessary, especially because they're undocumented. So they choose to just take a back seat in this case as workers and not file anything in pursuit of getting a wage theft claim, as well as the fact that on state average, it takes 875 days for the moment that somebody submits a claim to the labor commissioner's office before they even reach a settlement hearing. Next slide, please. To break that down even further, we did an environmental scan here in San Diego County. As I mentioned previously in the last slide, 875 days is the state average. Here in San Diego County, on average in 2021, it's 475 days. That number since 2021 has risen just a little bit because of the influx that has happened over time, and because of the lack of staff that is at the labor commissioner's office currently. They don't have enough staffing to help the onslaught of wages that are submitted, or wage theft judgments that are submitted, in order for their staff to review the claims. So businesses are taking advantage of that knowledge that they have, and unfortunately, workers are not being paid out what they are owed. And just to break it down even more, next slide. In the data that we have, because we do have a lot of data that backs this up, and I will provide a link to our website where you can take a look at the total unpaid judgments. We have a dashboard that shows this, and you can take a look at that. In San Diego County to date, we have a total of unpaid judgments of 1,305 unsatisfied judgments, and that equates to 17.5 million in owed to workers. In California as a whole, there's 19,188 unpaid unsatisfied judgments, totaling 425.9 million owed to workers. Next slide, please. Some of the initiatives, I won't get into deep detail about our initiatives just because I want to be cognizant of time for my other panelist members who need to get into their slides. But we do have quite a few enforcement avenues for our programs here at the Office of Labor Standards Enforcement. I'll get into more detail of our Workplace Justice Fund, what that is about, as well as our Good Faith Restaurant Owners Program. But the other avenues that we do enforce under is the Alternatives to Incarceration, Subcontractor Transparency Ordinance, the Working Families Ordinance B74, which is Board Policy 74, and the right-of-way done right. The Alternatives to Incarceration was an act by the Board of Supervisors in 2021, which at the time, District 3 Supervisor Tara Lawson Reamer wanted the public safety group or the chief administrator's office to find ways of how we could reduce the recidivism rates here in San Diego County. Last year, the public safety group came to our office because they noticed with their consultant Sandag that there was a common theme of a barrier that they found here in San Diego County, that one of the major areas that they were seeing was a hurdle for their constituents or the constituents here in San Diego County was employment. And that was because there was multiple violations under the Fair Chance Act law. What the Fair Chance Act law is what we also know as the ban the box, where employers cannot ask applicants about their criminal conviction histories. So if you're an employer and you have on your application, are you a convicted felon? Do you have a criminal record history? Those are technically violations of the Fair Chance Act, and you cannot ask anybody about that on your application history. You can't ask any type of question about somebody's background in a conviction or criminal record until a conditional offer is submitted. So once a conditional offer is submitted to an applicant, at that point in time, you are allowed to ask somebody about their conviction history or their criminal records. And then even further to take it, their criminal records or conviction histories have to have some nexus to the job. So if you are, say, applying for a demolition job and your conviction is for check fraud, there's no nexus, or there's no correlation between the two. So you can't hold the person or the applicant, you can't hold them accountable, or you can't hold them reliable or not reliable. You can't hold them to say, I'm going to rescind this job offer because of your conviction history on check cash fraud, when there's no correlation between check cash fraud and them drilling into a pavement. So there's been multiple times that we found employers violating the Fair Chance Act. So our office has been asked to create a localized Fair Chance ordinance to help educate employers on the Fair Chance Act. So that's what we've been doing, and more information about that will come out in June of 2024, so June of this year. We'll be localizing a Fair Chance ordinance so that we can help employers understand the law a little bit more and make sure that they are following with that further. The Subcontractor Transparency Ordinance is just an ordinance that holds subcontractors and contractors accountable. If you're working on any county-owned buildings or leases, you must follow all labor standards compliance, meaning that you have to put up HR posters, you have to have certain certifications, OSHA requirements, you have to pay paid sick leave, those type of things. Same with the Working Families Ordinance. If you're working on any county contracted buildings or leases, it's same thing. B74 is a board policy that is under our jurisdiction for our landscapers, county contracted security services, and our janitorial staff. They are third-party vendors under us. They're technically not county employees, but we treat them like they are our county staff because they work very hard for our county buildings and our county infrastructure, that we treat them like that, and we want to make sure that they are paid like they are county staff. The right-of-way done right was enacted that anybody who works on our county maintained roads will be paid prevailing wage. We found that businesses like HP, SDG&E, if they worked on a county maintained road, they were only being paid certain wages like $36 an hour, when the prevailing wage across the nation for flaggers who hold the signs stop and go, the prevailing paid rate was $68 plus, depending on the certifications that you have. So if you work on a county maintained road, you must be paid prevailing wage. So that was the right of way done right. Next slide, please. So the Workplace Justice Fund was established because we realized, due to the timeline issues in the state, with those who file a wage claim to the state, it was taking on average 475 days from the time that they submitted their claim that they had a wage theft judgment against a business to the point that they had a settlement meeting with the labor commissioner's office. And the labor commissioner came back saying, yes, you are awarded judgment. This is the amount of judgment that you're awarded. And then a judge signs off on this saying that that employer does owe you wages, say it's $14,000 that you're owed in wages. The judge stamps it, and the judge now says back to the employer or the employee, it's on you to try and collect that $14,000 from the employer. Well, months goes by. Rachel, as the employee, reaches out to John Doe, the employer, saying, hey, remember that piece of paper the judge stamped? You still owe me the $14,000. But John Doe is not responding to any of my messages. Their business is closed down. I can't get a hold of them. And my only recourse is to go to the courts, but I don't have the means necessary to try and file any type of civil judgment. I don't know how to file liens against them or whatnot, of how to get that money that the judge said I am owed. So the county established the Workplace Justice Fund, where we had an allotted amount of money to be able to give people like myself, Rachel, the employee, that if you had a wage theft judgment that met certain parameters, we will take the judgment. You will sign the judgment over to our office. We will upfront $3,000 or $4,000, depending on if you could show that you were fired in retaliation for submitting the judgment. And we will work to file liens or any means necessary to get the funds back from the employer. So our county has the means necessary to take the steps to track down those employers. We have the tools. We have the auditor and controller, and we also have a revenue and recovery, like a collections agency in the county that's able to track down the employer or the LLC or the business or whatever it is in the state that they're filed under, and be able to file certain parameters against their business or against their personal assets to be able to collect that judgment owed for the workers. This was established and started as of January 1st. We were allotted only $100,000, and we've already exhausted the funds as of today. Next slide. And I'll go a little bit quicker because I know I'm taking a little bit of time. The Good Faith Business Restaurant Owner Program was a program that was established to help also combat wage theft judgments. So the restaurant industry is one of the highest areas that we see where workers are not being paid. And we can, at this point in time, be able to go to the restaurant owners who have judgments against them, and we can file a claim against their judgment to be able to suspend their food permits at that time. Next slide. So I'll get into the new employment laws, and I'll go a little bit fast through this. So the minimum wage, as we know, in 2024, federal is $7.25. In the state of California, it's $16. In the city of San Diego, it's $16.85. It's $20 per hour for fast food industries effective April 1st. And then specific rates for healthcare facilities effective June 1st per the SB 25. Next slide. Paid sick leave in 2024. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with this or not, but as of January 1st, 2024, workers used to be entitled to 3 days of paid sick leave. As of January 1st, they are now entitled to 5 days of paid sick leave instead of the 3. So at least 30 days with the same employer in the current year, 90 days with the same employer or full-time as a temporary worker. And you have the option of doing 1 hour of accrued sick leave for every 30 hours, or you front load the 5 days or 40 hours of sick leave each year for a 12-month period. And any unused accrued sick leave must be carried over each year unless there's a cap placed on it. Next slide. The use of earned sick leave is its broad use, so it can be determined employee physically or mentally unstable, perform job injury or condition, professional diagnosis or treatment. Sick leave can also be used in the sense of if you have a domestic violence issue, you can utilize your sick leave for that. Safe time, it's the psychological services, so that would fall under that, and family members as well use your sick leave for that. Who is covered? Any employee who performs, next slide. Any employee who performs at least 2 hours of work in 1 or more calendar weeks including in the year, so minors, salaried, non-exempt employees. This is not applicable to public employees, workers on federal enclaves, employees exempt from California minimum wage laws. And then there's no exemption for small businesses or nonprofits and no minimum salary requirement. Next slide. So important sick leave requirements, the confidentiality, employees are prohibited from requiring an employee to disclose details related to their medical condition, and the documentation for an absence for more than 5 consecutive work days. So they don't have to provide documentation unless they're going to be absent from work for more than 5 days. It used to be 3, but now it is 5 consecutive days. After 5 consecutive days, an employer may require reasonable documentation. Next slide. So OLSE supports businesses because we have partnered with a Shaw Law Group. So they are a law group here with permanent employment law firm. We also partner with the city through an annual training, and we have Second Chance Month with our partners through there. We partner with the Center for Employment Opportunity. We also partner with Second Chance and a number of other stakeholders. Next slide. Off-duty cannabis use is a protected class now, effective January 1st of this year. Employers cannot discriminate against an applicant or employee because they use cannabis off-duty and away from work. It's not impairing the job. And there are exceptions to this if there are construction industries, positions requiring federal backgrounds, because the federal laws still apply. Next slide, and this is just a little bit more. Employers cannot ask or discriminate against applicants or employees based on their prior use of cannabis. Next slide, the Revised Wage Prevention Act notice. This notice is the existence of federal and state emergency and disaster for the county where employees will be employed if it's issued within 30 days the employee's first employment. So this is just one of if wage theft is going to be an issue, you have to have notice posted on your board, and you can find out more information on this on the DIR's website. Employers, next slide, please. Employers must offer unpaid reproductive loss. So this is in addition to your PTO and other time off. If you have an employee who unfortunately has lost a child or something, you must offer this, and I'll go quickly through it. And follow through with SB 848. Eligible employees must offer up to 5 days in additional to the paid sick leave. And then you can go to next slide too. And then we'll just go through the next slide. Additionally, employers must develop workplace violence prevention programs. So you have to track if there was a violent issue in the workplace. This is very, and this is coming up. This will be effective July 1st. So if there's ever an issue where it's an altercation between coworker to coworker or a customer to your employee, or if it's your manager to employee, everything has to now be documented, and it's very thorough. I believe on the next slide, There, if you go to the DIR's website, there is templates that you can find on how to track this. You must track everything through OSHA. OSHA will come and audit your stuff now, even if you have. I think there's a rule for 5 employees or less, as well as healthcare facilities as well. I'll go through it next slide quickly. The next 5 slides, the top 5 ways to stay out of court. Number 5 is document, document, document. Always document. It doesn't need to be formal. Just make sure that if you ever find yourself in a situation, document it, even if it's talking to your employees. Number 4, utilize your resources. Contact human resources. Just be consistent. Or number 3, that leads into number 3, be consistent. Treat everybody the same. Just don't rush to judgment. Number 2, talk the talk and walk the walk. Your conduct matters. Be respectful, lead by example. As everyone always says, treat others how you would like to be treated. Nothing is off the record. Build a team, be a leader. And number 1, follow applicable rules and procedures. You have to know them to follow them. So please, I don't know if these slides will be made available, but everything I had mentioned for the new employment laws, I had all the SB at the bottom, all the laws were there so you could follow up on them. And that's all I have. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for all the information that you shared with us, and also your office's work in supporting our regional businesses and employers to adhere to these complex laws. I know we're in a little bit of a time crunch, so we do have some questions in the comment chat. If you're able to answer them online via text, so everybody could see the answers. They're from Christian Moreno, or also if Christian could also share his email, that'd be super helpful to follow up with the questions if they're unable to to answer via chat. So thank you again, Rachel. We'll rapidly transition to our next speaker. I'd like to introduce Charlie Kim, Program Manager of the Public-Private Partnership and Exercise Program at the San Diego Law Enforcement Coordination Center. A bit of the background of LECC for short. They are an integral component of DHS, Department of Homeland Security's 80 fusion centers across the country that serve as a focal point for the receipt, analysis, gathering, and sharing of threat-related information between all levels in government and the private sector partners. So all I can say is get ready for a few minutes of worrisome information, but we'll prepare your business or any type of security threats. All right? Really,
am I on now? I can't hear.
Yes, you're on.
Okay. All right. Hi, I'm Charlie Kim from the San Diego Law Enforcement Coordination Center. We are the regional fusion center recognized by the Department of Homeland Security for receipt, analysis, and dissemination of criminal and national security intelligence in this region. So we cover the entire border, San Diego and Imperial counties. I'll give you a quick presentation. I'm from New York, so I can talk fast. I'm not sure I can talk fast enough, but I'll try. This is basically some resources. What are we? The Fusion Center is one of 80 DHS recognized fusion centers in the United States. These were all created after the 9/11 attacks with the idea of trying to assure that there would not be gaps in the sharing of information like there were in 9/11. There are 6 of them in California. We are a very intensive state because we have a lot of things going on, transnational criminal activity on the border, as well as a host of threats. A lot of you may know, or some of you may know, that the 9/11 attackers learned to fly their aircraft in San Diego. Next slide, please. What do we do? Well, as shown on here, we basically do a whole bunch of things. We have 12 units in our center. They do strategic intelligence products for law enforcement. We do investigative support for police agencies because obviously a lot of police agencies don't have enough officers, so we provide support there. When we say targeting, we're not talking targeting in the military sense. We're talking about targeting for warrants on people. Open source intelligence collection on anything that could be a potential violent event that's going on. That includes searching for school shooter postings, things like that, active shooters. Geospatial intelligence, which obviously informs not only law enforcement, but we also do geospatial intelligence mapping for fire service on fires. We do cybersecurity, and I'll talk about that. Tips and leads, I'll talk about that. We have a diversion unit that basically deals with people who have been diverted from the criminal justice system for treatment, to track their activities, to make sure they're in compliance with their terms of probation. We have a threat liaison officer program, which is intended for first responders, police, fire, and EMS. And we have a private sector program, which I run, that also deals with public agencies, that runs something called the Infrastructure Liaison Officer Program, which is designed for people who are not first responders. And then we also have a critical infrastructure protection unit, and I'll talk about them, as well as a watch center, which deals with deconfliction of law enforcement operations. Next slide, please. Our partners are on this list. You can see there's a lot of them. We have in-house Department of Homeland Security Intelligence and Analysis, a reports officer. We have an FBI liaison in-house. We regularly work with the Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity, and Infrastructure Security Agency, and I'll talk about them a little bit. We also have Customs Border Protection, DEA, National Guard, the Sheriff's Department, which is our primary host, and a bunch of local police agencies, all of which are listed below. Next slide, please. What do we do for you? You know, we're at your service. We are a public agency, publicly funded. We provide information sharing. Now that's bi-directional, and we'll discuss that in a moment. We provide training, so we can come out and train at your facilities and your personnel. It's all free because your tax dollars have already paid for it. We also provide exercise support if you want to try and exercise the viability of your emergency plans. Those could be emergency operations plans principally, but they could also be safety and security plans. We provide something called a virtual walkthrough, and I'll chat about that in a minute, as well as vulnerability assessments that will allow you to have some sense of what the vulnerabilities are in your facilities and how those gaps can be closed. Next slide, please. Information sharing. We, for those who are on our contact list, and I'll talk about how you get on that later, we have produced a weekly newsletter. It is in the form of a link that you can click on that takes you to the Fusion Center. And we discuss not only the threat of the week, but we also discuss a number of specific threats that we've identified, as well as vulnerabilities that we and other government agencies have identified in physical security issues and cybersecurity issues. It's about a 7-page long document that comes out once a week, so it's got a lot of things. It refers largely to a lot of public information. Nothing here is classified. It's all unclassified, either completely unclassified for anybody, or it's for official use only, which means it's really intended to stay within the community that needs to see it. Next slide, please. We also provide training on terrorism, active shooter, bomb threats, how to deal with those. That includes improvised explosive devices, which we used to call booby traps. Insider threats, which would include principally theft of your intellectual property or trade secrets. So if you're a business that has trade secrets, obviously those are going to be potentially a target, especially if you're in a high-tech company. We also provide training on cyber crimes and how to protect yourself, and a variety of other things. So you may look at these images. You can see there's a flag of ISIS on the right-hand side. There's the famous photograph from the Oklahoma City bombings on the lower left, which is the largest domestic terrorist event in modern United States history. Robb Elementary School, which was the shooting down in Texas in Uvalde, and then obviously a sort of generic cyber criminal image. Next slide. We also, as I said, help with exercise. We will help you develop and facilitate the exercises. It's really focused on critical infrastructure operators, but are you critical infrastructure operators? You bet you are. If you're running a small business, you are providing services that the public needs. And most, quite frankly, services of all kinds are provided by small businesses. So in an emergency, if you are the subject of an attack, whether it is a cyber attack or whether it is a kinetic attack, active shooter, a bomb threat, if your business ceases to exist or its function is disrupted, that disrupts your services and provision of goods to the public, and that is a matter of concern to us. Next slide, please. Virtual walkthroughs are a product that we do. It is very similar to a product that the Department of Homeland Security runs called the Infrastructure Visualization Platform. Our virtual walkthroughs are similar, much simpler to do, much faster to do, more readily available. We send out a team of between 2 to 6 people with 360-degree cameras, and we will run a interior and exterior view of your facility based on floor plans. Now, if you look at this photograph, the picture on the left is of the Mumbai Hotel, the Taj Hotel in Mumbai, that came under attack by a large group of terrorists in what we call a complex coordinated attack. When the law enforcement were attempting to make entry to the building and government soldiers were attempting to get in, they thought they had cleared parts of the hotel and discovered, much to their dismay, that the bad guys knew the hotel better than they did. And so they would clear an area, and then the terrorists would come in behind and attack them from the rear. The virtual walkthrough is designed to avoid this happening for law enforcement if they're responding to an active shooter situation or a terrorist event. And so we rely on floor plans. And on the right, you will see a floor plan that's laid out. Some of you may recognize that as the floor plans, architectural drawings for Osama bin Laden's residence in Pakistan, which was raided by a SEAL Team 6. So, in fact, SEAL Team not only had floor plans, but they built scale models of the entire facility so they could run the rehearsals ahead of time and know exactly where all the doors were, hallways were, stairways were, which way the doors opened. All of that is the kind of information that our product will assist law enforcement with. Next slide. It appears that our video does not work. So I'll tell you what the video would have showed is it showed how the 360 runs and what it looks like. Can you jump back one slide, please? Okay, all right, jump forward. Sorry about that. Vulnerability assessment. Oops, nope, back. Vulnerability assessments are, as I said, a way of assessing what your risks are. There are 2 tools. One is the Security at First Entry tool, or SAFE tool, which is a product from the Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Typically, a protective security advisor from DHS would come out, and we work very closely with them to do that. It is a fairly comprehensive view of the security arrangements you have, and it covers not only your equipment and your facilities, but also what your procedures and policies are. We also provide something through our center called the Vulnerability Assessment, which is a simplified version of the SAFE tool. It really focuses more on the security aspects that would be needed if you were applying, for example, for a nonprofit security grant from the Department of Homeland Security. But we also do it for businesses. We've done it for big box stores. We've done it for defense contractors. We have done it for schools and small businesses, as well as utilities. So something to think about, available. In terms of reporting suspicious behavior, that is important. We receive tips and leads all the time, and over 1,500 a year. Those all come in through either the website you're seeing there or through the QR code, and I urge you to make a copy of that QR code. We're focused on behavior that could indicate a possible terrorism nexus, active shooter, bomb threat, or a cyber threat. This applies both to businesses, government agencies, schools, churches, anything where there could be an incidence of mass violence. We want to know about it. We have the ability to reach across state lines to other fusion centers to get information across the state also. This was especially relevant for the whole issue of organized retail crime, where you had all these smash and grabs with mobs of people coming in and stealing things from businesses. That was coordinated across the entire state and across state lines between the fusion centers to identify the people who were involved in that and result in their arrest. So that's how we can help you directly. A lot of small businesses will see things that we will not. For example, if someone's renting a truck and they're a little vague about some of the information they're providing, or they're paying all in cash, that's something we want to know. Tim McVeigh, who bombed the Oklahoma City Murrah building, used a Ryder truck, and there have been other instances where other trucks have been used. A Home Depot truck was used for a terrorist attack. We want to know these kind of things. If you operate a business like a pool supply company, chemicals used there can readily be used to make explosives. Same thing for even hair salon supply companies. So we urge you to do that. Next slide, please. What do we want you to report? Well, who, what, when, where, and why it was suspicious. The most important part in terms of our analysis of whether there's a problem is what the behavior was. We don't care who the person was, but we do care, and we care about who they were just as their identity, but not something about them, whether they were tall or short. We do want to know what their behavior was, why it was suspicious, and then back into that. Next slide, please. I think we've lost our image here. I'm not sure why. But anyway, there's a list here. I'm not going to go through it in the interest of time, but we can you can get that from us. Next slide, please. When you get a suspicious report that comes in, when it comes into us, it is investigated by something called our Tips and Leads Unit. That is comprised of police officers whose full-time job it is to conduct an initial review of the suspicious activity report. They will typically reach back to you to speak with you to find out what you saw and get more details. If it is validated, then if it's terrorism related, it goes to the Joint Terrorism Task Force, which is run by the FBI, for investigation. If it is not, it goes to a local police agency. I've put San Diego PD down there, but it could go to the sheriffs, El Cajon PD, Escondido, Oceanside, tribal police, any one of the possible agencies that are involved. Typically, you would not hear back what happened, but it's important that we get these. Typically, about 10% are considered valid enough to require some sort of further criminal investigation. But that doesn't mean the other 90% are invalid. A lot of them are overlaps. So don't be afraid to report. We'd rather know something and have it not be anything than to not know something that's important. It's important for you to understand that these really matter. We had, in the last 6 months, 2 school SARs submitted that resulted in the interdiction of what were fairly advanced plots to shoot up schools. So your contributions matter. Don't think it's limited just to reporting about your business. If you are a school, church, a commercial thing, a movie theater, anywhere, we want to know about anything you observe that's suspicious. Next slide. Points of contact here. I've included in the points of contact Phil Oglesby, who runs our Critical Infrastructure Protection Unit. He would be the person that you would contact about coming out and reviewing your facility in terms of its safety and security. I've included myself because you can reach out to me at any time. My my senior intelligence analyst is Justin Berquist, who does our newsletter and also coordinates a lot of our work. Great guy, super hardworking, very experienced. And then Michelle Flores, who's the Protective Security Advisor for this region for the Department of Homeland Security. We work very closely with her. She is a longtime employee of the Department of Homeland Security, and so she is a great resource. I've dropped into the chat some resources here, but it looks like there's a cap on how much we can put in there. So what I will do is I will provide the balance of that information to the chamber, and then you can Jimena can distribute it out. Sorry, I ran over, but I talked as fast as I could.
No problem, Charles.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. I'm hearing a bit of an echo. There we go. Thank you so much for all the information. I think it's safe to say you had us all at the edge of our seats, but also thank you for the work in preparing small businesses for such difficult situations. And I'll make sure to share all this information within the comment section and also on a follow-up email, also for our audience to check out the video that wasn't able to be projected earlier. All right, turning it over to our last but not least speaker, we wanted to include an overview of policy items to keep on the radar for our small business community. So for our legislative overview, we have Jennings email joining us today, who serves as the Vice President of the Western Region in the Government Affairs Division for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. This office is responsible for legislative and political grassroots activities in Arizona, California, Hawaii, Nevada, and Utah in support of the Chamber's national public policy goals. So, Jennings, it was actually great seeing you briefly at our recent trip to Washington, D.C. with our binational delegation. And thank you so much for your ongoing partnership with the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce.
Great. Thank you, Jimena. Thanks for having me. And as mentioned, we very much appreciate the partnership, relationship, longtime relationship that we've had with the San Diego Regional Chamber. It was great joining you all on the fly-in a couple of weeks ago. I'm actually back in DC now in a hotel, as you can see in the background, but looking forward to getting back to San Diego in a few hours.
Yeah.
Done. Yes.
Oh, there we go. It seemed like we couldn't hear you for the past minutes. I was trying to reach out. But we
can you hear me now?
you now. So we'll see as far as it goes.
Sorry about that. Hopefully the audio sticks. But we work on a lot of different issues impacting small business. Small businesses represent 90% of our membership. They represent about half of the nation's GDP. More than half of the country's employees are employed by small businesses. We have a small business council at the U.S. Chamber that consists of about 100 or so folks that advocate on a lot of the issues that impact small business directly in front of Congress. So this is a big part of what we do. What we've been doing since 2017 in partnership with MetLife is kind of doing a small business survey or an index where we go out and we survey, roughly 500 to 800 small businesses around the country and get a sense of how their business is doing, how the local economy is doing, what their take is on the national economy. Overall, small businesses tend to be pretty optimistic, pretty positive about their own circumstances and how they're doing. And we see that reflected in the index. This last quarter in 2024, generally positive. Really, the only kind of quarters where we saw kind of negative input from the small business community was in the immediate aftermath of the pandemic in 2020. But some key findings from this last quarter are that 65% of the businesses we surveyed said that they were in good health, but only 32% say that the nation's economy is in good health. And that's kind of a disparity that we've seen over the last several years. So not really a surprise. But a couple of noteworthy findings here as well. The fact that there is a high degree of consumer. And a lot of that has to do with rising cost of doing business, with rising interest rates, of course, lack of workforce, quality workforce. And so you see that in the part at the bottom, the expectations for businesses in terms of what they look at for the rest.
Quick interruption, Jennings. Again, I think we're having mic problems. No. Try that one more time. Maybe unmute and then unmute yourself. Let me check. All right. All right. I think we're hearing some volume.
Can you hear me at all?
Yes, we got it.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'll give you the slide deck so you can distribute the slide deck to everybody if you can't hear me. There's good information on the slide deck. But next slide, please, Jimena, if you can hear me. So as I was saying, kind of the overall sentiment of the small business community is positive. And you see that reflected in the number of small business applications. There were 5.5 million new applications last year. And this has really been a trend that's accelerated post-pandemic, where you're seeing a lot of small business startups, a lot of applications for EIN numbers, which is a good thing. You're seeing the same exact thing in California. Last year, there were 558,000 applications for new businesses in the state of California. That's about an 8% increase. So overall, things are trending in the right direction from a small business perspective. Next slide, please. Now, there are, of course, concerns, and I don't think this will come as a surprise to most of you what those concerns are. But if you look at kind of our data from this last quarter, the top concern continues to be, like I said, inflation, rising costs. About 52% of small businesses polled cited inflation as their top concern. You've got new concerns with revenue, about 29% citing revenue now as a top concern. That could be something to keep an eye on looking forward as consumer spending starts to pull back a little bit. So that's kind of a disconcerting development. And then interest rates, of course, going up and continuing to stay up. That continues to be a major concern for small businesses. In addition to kind of some of these rising cost issues that we're seeing, workforce shortage and the lack of available workers, of course, has contributed to a lot of the rising cost concerns. But the workforce issue continues to be a problem. We still have about 2.5 million more job openings than we have people actually looking to work. And about 60% of respondents indicated to us that they are actively searching or having difficulty filling positions. So that continues to be a major problem facing businesses. And of course, a lot of that has to do with childcare issues and the expense of childcare. Childcare is roughly about $17,000 a year on average for per child for a family in the state of California. So inflation, workforce shortage, retail crime is something that has also grown as a significant risk factor for businesses, particularly in California. We've seen a huge spike in retail crime. Last year, there were over $20 billion in losses due to retail crime alone, and over $3 billion in lost tax revenue to the state. So this is a big issue to keep an eye on. Next slide, please. So these issues and these concerns really inform our advocacy agenda at the U.S. Chamber. So what are we doing in Washington, D.C.? We're talking about how we can reduce the cost of doing business, how we can alleviate some of these workforce concerns, reduce red tape. And this is our focus. So really kind of when you look, I wanted to kind of highlight 4 of the major bills that we're advocating on, or 3 of the major bills that we're advocating on in Washington, D.C. The first one is the Tax Relief for American Families and Workers Act. This is the R&D immediate expensing. So R&D has been, we've incentivized research and development in this country for many years. In fact, just about every country on the face of the earth has done this. However, our provision for immediately expensing R&D expired a few years ago, and Congress has failed to renew this provision. And unfortunately, they have not acted this year, or at least the Senate hasn't. The House passed a bipartisan package that renews R&D, that has bonus depreciation, net interest deduction, really important provisions for business, particularly for small business. But the Senate has yet to act. So we need to continue to push the Senate to pass this bipartisan bill as soon as possible. The Main Street Tax Certainty Act is another big one. Some of you may recall the tax reform package in 2017. There was a 20% deduction for pass-through small businesses, so businesses that are not, C corps that file at the individual rate got access to a 20% deduction on their taxes. This is set to expire at the end of 2025, along with a host of other provisions. The Main Street Tax Certainty Act makes that 20% deduction permanent. We need to advocate on this issue and also talk to your congressional delegation about supporting this, about signing on to this bill as a co-sponsor. That's going to be really important, because there's going to be a massive tax fight in 2025 on a lot of different issues, and we have to make sure that small business interests are being taken care of and looked out for. The other bill that's out there that was just released this year is the Prove It Act, which essentially forces agencies to when they say that a rule or regulation does not have an impact on small business or has a minimal impact on small business, and they go ahead and they certify that. Well, the Prove It Act makes sure that they actually have to prove that, in fact, there's not going to be a negative financial or economic impact on small business if they're passing rules and regulations. And so it really is a way for small business to hold some of these agencies to account, because we're seeing a lot of agencies passing really bad rules and regulations for the business community in general, and certainly not taking into account the impact on small businesses. So that's a really important bill that we're going to have to try to gin up support for over the next several months. And again, another opportunity to reach out to the congressional delegation in San Diego County and urge them to take a look at that and support that bill to kind of reduce some of the red tape and onerous impacts on small business. And then, of course, the nation's immigration laws, that goes without saying. We've been talking about updating our immigration visa caps and things like that for literally 30 years in this country. It's not working, and employers need access to talent across the spectrum, and immigration is going to have to play a role in this. So we're going to continue to fight that fight in Washington, D.C. Next slide, please. And kind of I'll wrap things up. I know that we're kind of running out of time, but the big issue, all of this, of course, happens with the backdrop of dysfunction in Washington, D.C. We know partisan gridlock, the fact that every 2 years we get a different House, different Senate. We're seeing constant change elections. We're seeing narrowing majorities. We currently have a one majority in the Senate. It's a 51 to 49 split in the Senate. There is a one-person majority in the House at the moment. And this has been the trend over the last couple of years. This is probably going to continue to be the case. So we're going to see a lot of gridlock, very difficult environment to get things done. What that has meant is that you see a very hyperactive executive branch passing really bad rules and regulations, for example, right now, or you see states kind of acting on their own. And the state of California has tried to fill this void and pass a bunch of bills, oftentimes that are not so good for the business community. But we're seeing that happen in states across the country. And so this has been a really bad development, but also why it's important that we kind of continue to urge members to work across the aisle in a bipartisan way, because things are divided. And if you're going to make good policy, you need buy-in from both Republicans and Democrats. And currently the environment really requires that at the moment. Next slide, please. And because of this dysfunction, of course, it's no surprise that the last session of Congress wasn't all that productive. In fact, it was the least productive session in modern history, with just 22 bills signed into law. Limited accomplishments, but we were able to, of course, keep the government open. We increased the debt ceiling, we got the NDAA, we got some good things done. And I think that looking into this year, there's some hope that we can hopefully move some of these tax packages forward and get some good things for the small business community. Next slide, please. And speaking of that, like I said, we've got the tax bill that passed out of the House. We're just waiting for the Senate to finally move on that. Big tax fight looming in 2025. We were able to get the Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan supplemental done out of the House and out of the Senate, but a lot of other things going on. Funding for the government in 2025, FAA reauthorization being looked at this week on the Senate side. And who knows what's going to happen with data privacy, AI regulation. These are going to have a huge impact on the small business, what the federal government decides to do here. And then retail crime legislation. There are some bills that are out there that talk about improving coordination, really seeing where the federal government can play more of a role in cracking down on organized retail crime that's taking place across county lines, across state lines. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to make some progress there and hopefully get some of these things added into some must-pass pieces of legislation before the end of the year. Next slide, please. And lastly, I just want to mention for you all, if you get one takeaway from this presentation, to the extent that you can hear anything I'm saying, please go to uschamber.com/co. That has all of our small business resources, really, really good stuff on day-to-day, how to, navigate kind of the difficult challenges of running a small business, to providing benefits for your workers, all of these things. There's some good policy stuff in there as well. Super popular site. In fact, it's the most popular thing that we have at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So I really encourage you all to check that out, uschamber.com/co, to get access to more of our digital resources. And with that, I'll end it there. My next slide just has my contact information. Feel free to reach out anytime, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Jennings. And as I said earlier, please continue to consider the Chamber as a partner, especially in these advocacy issues that are really important for our small business community. I'll personally, but definitely be following up on some of the legislation that you mentioned. But for right now, as we're right on time, that's all the time we have for today. But before we leave, I wanted to follow up on Jenny's conversation and advocating within our congressional delegation. We have our congressional luncheon tomorrow with the entire team, and it's a great opportunity to not only follow up on the discussions that were touched on in our recent delegation trip to Washington D.C., but also issues regarding small business issues, local issues that require more attention. So in addition to that, we also have Small Business Awards coming up on July 10th, where we will be recognizing a number of small businesses throughout through a nomination process that you can easily find on our website, and I'll post in the comment box as well. Self-nominations are welcomed and appreciated and are due on June 29th. And in addition to that, on September 18th, we will be having our annual Small Business Saturday Forum and Expo. It's an in-person event where we will be planning a day of having in-depth trainings and a platform where we will offer regional resources from other partners to help small businesses prepare for Small Business Saturday specifically. And that takes place a day after Black Friday in November to encourage consumers to support independent businesses throughout the holiday season. So please stay tuned for more information regarding that event. And again, thank you all so much. Thank you, Rachel, Jennings, Charles, for just speaking to our community. And we hope to keep in touch and stay tuned for more Small Business Series events. Thank you all.